Hello again, it's Laura Rice with a Texas Extra. This time, we're revisiting my interview with the author of a new biography about Larry McMurtry. David Streitfeld, the writer of Western Star, got to do something I unfortunately never did: interview McMurtry. But much more than that, the two became friends. So Streitfeld and I had a lot more to talk about than fit into our allotted time for Texas Standard's radio broadcast. We talked extensively about Lonesome Dove, and in this longer cut, you'll hear a little more about McMurtry's reaction to the television miniseries, and whether McMurtry himself was more of an Augustus McCrae or a Woodrow Call. We also talked more about what Streitfeld hopes readers would get out of this new book. You'll also learn just a little bit about me in this extended interview and why I named one of my kids after a McMurtry character. Hope you enjoy. You've got it tuned to the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. When Texas Standard put together its list for our Movie Madness bracket to determine the best Texas film, we had a few rules. They had to be filmed at least in part in Texas and set here. We put a limit of 2 on how many movies from each director could be on the list, but we didn't limit writers, which is how 3 stories originally written by Larry McMurtry made the list: HUD, The Last Picture Show, and Terms of Endearment. Lonesome Dove would surely have made the list too, but we limited ourselves to theatrical films. McMurtry captured something so special about Texas in some very different stories. David Streitfeld explores McMurtry's writing, his personal odyssey, and his legacy in a new book, Western Star. David, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, I told you I was going to ask about, why another Larry McMurtry book? Because Larry, of course, wrote so much about himself. He wrote so much, but you had a distinct relationship with him and a perspective on him.
Yeah, I was destined, I think, to write this book, which might be my excuse for having it taken 20, 30 years. I met Larry in the 1990s when I was a journalist in Washington, D.C., and he was a part-time bookseller in Washington, D.C. when he wasn't in Texas. And I wanted to write about him. He resisted, but I went to his store in Texas, then had about 400,000 books, picked through them, wrote an article about it. He responded to that, and out of that, we became friends.
Well, we talked about how this interview could go so many different ways. We could talk about Texas and his personal odyssey, or we could just talk about Lonesome Dove, which is sort of where we settled because, if there's one piece of work that I think he's still most known for, it would be that one. You think that's true?
I think that's true, and somehow, for a variety of reasons, Lonesome Dove has, in the past couple of years, especially the last year, started selling at an incredible rate. It sells about 100,000 copies a year, which is just enormous. So I figure only time will tell if Lonesome Dove is a great American novel, but it's certainly the great Texas novel. And it seems like a lot of people in Texas and outside of Texas want to read about Texas.
What do you attribute to the fact that it's gained this renewed attention? Of course, we lost Larry not too long ago. That could be part of it. People saying, what did I miss?
I think that's part of it. I think there's a couple of reasons. The novel, it's about, if you're one of the few who hasn't read it or seen it or had any experience with the miniseries, it's about a cattle drive in the late 19th century from the Rio Grande up to Montana. And it evokes Texas history. And it says something about the present as well, it seems. It talks about things that people at the moment have questions about that they feel aren't being answered in their lives, like male friendship. I mean, you see that discussed all the time in newspapers, but it's rare to see that much of it in a novel. And I think that's one element, at least, that people respond to. Another would be The book is about dreams, about the dreams that you have, that everyone has, and how you can end up middle aged or older and realize your dreams haven't quite come true, and maybe you fought on the wrong side all your
Mm.
life.
Mm. Well, and that last point, I was going to say the intersection with Texas history, because Texas history is not uncomplicated, and the Texas Rangers, particularly, are not uncomplicated, and that's what these two protagonists are, and he didn't shy away from that, especially if you go into to prequels and that sort of thing for Lonesome Dove.
Right. Larry felt that the history of Texas and really the whole settling of the West was a very dark story, full of full of murder, full of cultures trying to kill each other. But he also was proud of his ancestors, his relatives who had settled Texas, and he thought they were upstanding figures that had much to be admired. And so he was always wrestling with those two things. He liked the people, but didn't like the history, and he was unsettled by the history. And he always felt that Lonesome Dove was a story about the darkness, but somehow people responded differently when they read it, and they found in it a story that they thought was almost inspirational.
I mean, it makes me think too of the film series. I would encourage those who haven't read the book to go back and dig into that, because it, of course, they always say reading the book is a much richer experience, right? But the film series, I understand he wasn't a fan of, even at the time. Is that true?
He maintains that he never actually saw Lonesome Dove, the miniseries, all the way through, and that may well be true. The miniseries has many, many devoted admirers, and certainly the acting is great. Personally, I find it reminds me a bit too much of the excesses of the 1980s, and it doesn't really seem to have that classic look that suggests it will be watched 20 years from now. But I could be wrong.
If I have to pick a number two for me, it's The Last Picture Show, and it seems like that was Larry writing about his own small town experience. But then what's interesting about that series is the protagonist Sonny is not the protagonist as far as the whole series moves forward. It's this other character, Dwayne, right? I mean, could you talk a little about that?
Right. The Last Picture Show is with Lonesome Dove, Larry's other key book, and they're really related. The Lonesome Dove is about the settling of the West and the great dreams and heroic exploits and murderous times. And the Last Picture Show takes place a generation or two later when the West has been settled and people are bored out of their minds and would like to escape Texas, would like to escape these small towns, and find they can't. So it's about kind of the diminishing of dreams over time. And then, as Larry would, he loved to follow characters through novel after novel. And Dwayne is a sympathetic figure, but also to a large extent a tragic one. He doesn't know what to do with his life and how to make his life better, how to live heroically, however that may be.
One of your questions when we were setting this story up is, Larry's personal odyssey. How would you summarize that? I mean, what was that journey like for him in his career and how he saw what he wanted to accomplish?
Larry proceeded by instinct. He didn't have a career plan. He didn't have a plan for any of the books he wrote. He sat down and started typing and let the story go wherever it was. So, in that, he's not really a typical artist. Where he is like the great artist is his ambivalence about his subject. He loved Texas and he hated it. He would miss Texas incredibly, the big open skies, the freedom that he felt there when he was somewhere else. But then he would get to Texas and he'd be like, I can't stand it here. There's nothing to eat. He was particularly concerned about the bad food. And then he would feel that he'd have to leave, and he would leave. And he was impressed by the people, and yet he also found the people, as he portrayed them in Last Picture Show, narrow-minded and stuck in their own concerns and not reaching for a more impressive existence. So he was ambivalent, and the ambivalence came out on the page. And I think anybody who lives in Texas and is ambivalent themselves about the state will find in Larry an echo that they'll appreciate.
Well, Larry, I understand, spent more and more time outside of Texas as he grew older. He died in Tucson, Arizona. Did he still identify very strongly as a Texan?
He identified so strongly as a Texan that he told his writing partner, Diana Osana, to tell the newspapers when he died that he had died in Texas, even though he had really died in Tucson, Arizona. So he wanted to be portrayed in the media, in the popular imagination, as so Texan that he had died there.
I'm thinking now about Gus's last wish to drag his sign back to Lonesome Dove, right? To be buried there. Is there? Do you see some similarity in that?
Exactly. It was a very unusual case of the novel anticipating, predicting the reality that came about, 40 years later.
David Streitfeld explores McMurtry's writing, his personal odyssey, and his legacy in the book Western Star, which is out now. David, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we could keep going if we wanted to. I sort of felt like that was a beautiful way to end it, but then,
right. No, it's up to you. I can certainly answer more questions, but I leave it to you. Like every author, I can talk about my book for the next 6 hours, but I'm not sure the world needs to hear 5 hours and 45 minutes of it.
Oh, let me ask you this. I guess, sure. What do you hope that Western Star adds to our understanding of Larry McMurtry?
That's something I could talk about. Larry believed very firmly in books, the physical container that is the book. He started a bookstore on the edge of the Texas plains and put 500,000 books in it and expected people to come and buy them, which in retrospect is a daffy idea when this thing called the internet is blossoming everywhere. But he was a man of the book and abided by them and celebrated them and felt that that was his legacy, not the movies, that it was the books. And I would hope that my book adds a little understanding and a little entertainment, a little enjoyment. It's a fun story of meeting presidents and being on top of Hollywood and in general having a good time. And I tried to convey some of Larry's exuberance in telling the story. So I hope people understand Larry by reading my book, and I hope they enjoy reading the book just as a book.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited. My kids aren't big enough for all these stories yet, but it's going to be fun to read them to them. My little guy's middle name is Augustus.
Oh my God! Is that because of
this?
Yes,
it is. It's because of Lonesome Dove, which I recognize.
Wow, you should have said that. That was your intro, boy. Larry, even in his more trying times, like the end of his life when he was sick, kept his sense of humor. And Gus has a strongly developed sense of humor, an amused way of looking at the world. And Gus probably gets less done than his buddy Call, but I'd rather be Gus than Captain Call, and I'd rather my child be Gus than Captain Call, and I'd rather have a party with all the Gusses than Captain Call.
Absolutely.
So I think you did well in choosing the name Gus.
Yeah. So you think he was more of an Augustus or more of a Call?
He was always torn, as usual. Larry's life is about ambivalence, but unfortunately, he thought he was much more of a Call, a Captain Call, than an Augustus, meaning I think he even said at one point that he was about 80% Captain Call and 20% generously Augustus. So Larry was always getting up at 5 a.m. and setting the work, and he would leave the party, whatever party it was that he was invited to, early, or he wouldn't go to the party at all, so he could get up the next morning and go back to work. And he regretted that a little bit. He never really changed from that, but it's probably impossible to change your personality that much to go from the hard worker to the life of the party. I think Larry wished that he enjoyed things a bit more.
I relate to that though. I think I'm probably a Call too, but I think it says something about Larry that he could write Gus so fully. I think there must have been a lot more Gus in him than he always let out.
Well, maybe he just couldn't let it out or was afraid to. Because really, if you look back through his books, they all have this kind of split. I mean, Leaving Cheyenne, which is an early novel that people love, is about two men, both of whom are in love with the same woman. And it's the same dynamic. One is the hard worker, the other is the party guy. And the hard worker wishes he were a little looser and more of a fun guy. And the party guy is really happy just being the way he is. So it was something he battled against forever because he was the son of a Texas rancher, and his father got up every day at 4 at the latest every morning. And he made Larry get up that early too. And once you start getting up that early and setting the work as a child, you do it for the rest of your life.
Yeah, this is all going in the extras. This has been really delightful. David, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Well, I've given you hard work here to put this all together, but hopefully it'll be great.
I think it will be. Thank you.